Our founders, and for very good reason, did not want us to have to deal individually with the federal government. We were to deal individually with our local government, our county government, or with our state government, but not the federal government. Only the states were to deal with the federal government. And the reason for that is the perfect example would be taking a good look at Ireland and Scotland back during that day. Both Ireland and Scotland were part of the British Crown. They were underneath the British Crown. But the Irish were treated way worse than the Scottish. The Irish paid a direct tax. The British were on the Irish, like white on rice. They collected money from them. They harassed them. They wanted to see their papers. They basically made being Irish a very rough life. The Scottish, on the other hand, they demanded and got a parliament. They had their own representation to the British Crown. And yes, they did pay some taxes, but they didn't give a penny of their money to the British Crown. Any money that they gave through their parliament, and their parliament represented them with the British Crown. The individual Scottish did not have representatives from the British government coming to them collecting taxes or coming to them and searching their homes without a warrant. They were pretty much left alone. And that's pretty much what excuse me, our founders wanted for us. We did not mind so much back then being part of being a colony of the British, as long as we had a parliament, and as long as we didn't have to deal individually with the British government, that we had a parliament that dealt with the British government for us. So we didn't have to put up with all the bull crap. Well, what happened is Britain decided to establish the tea tax, which was a direct tax on all of the people that lived in the colonies. All of a sudden, everybody had to pay a direct tax to Great Britain. And that's what instigated the Boston Tea Party. And then that's what pretty much instigated the Declaration of Independence, because we were not going to allow ourselves to become as the Irish had become. We didn't mind living as the Scottish, but we were not going to live as the Irish did. And anyway, that brought about the Declaration of Independence. We fought an 8-year war against England, and we won. We won our independence. And then about 10 years later, it took about 10 years to put it together, but we put together the U.S. Constitution. Prior to that, for about 10 years, we had another type of constitution. It was called the Articles of Confederation that we lived under. And but we eventually got the Constitution of the United States. Excuse me here, I don't feel too good. So I'm kind of getting lost in my words here. But anyway, this is the game plan that our founders want us to go by in order to combat tyranny and to live as free men live. And it's absolute that we ourselves don't deal with the federal government. We have a state that does that. Now, here's something that's probably going to surprise most of you. Your federal taxes on your labor do not fund anything. It doesn't go to any projects, any fund, it doesn't help anybody. Your federal income tax money goes to pay the interest to the Federal Reserve. And we're going to talk more about the Federal Reserve here in a little bit. I'm going to take you up and show you the room where it was created in. Now, all you need to do is Google the Grace Commission. Back in 1982, President Reagan used Executive Order 12369 and issued the Grace Commission to find out and report back exactly where all of our federal tax dollars go. Because obviously he didn't know, and he wanted to know for the people where our tax dollars go. They reported back that about 1/3 of it was unaccountable. It was like it just disappeared in a black hole somewhere. And pretty much the rest of it went to pay the interest that we owe the Federal Reserve. And that the Federal Reserve is a private bank that we, all our money comes from. And I'll get with that in a few minutes. It's not how it's supposed to be. It's actually a very huge scam. And I will explain that in just a minute. But we just talked about the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment needs to be reversed. It needs to be done away with. You and I are not to pay the federal government a dime. We're not to have any type of governmental relationship with the federal government. The states handle that for us. That prevents the IRS from coming after us. That prevents federal agents from harassing us. It keeps us in a safe spot. And that is that was one of the requirements that our founders gave us in order to live in a free society. The second event is the 17th Amendment, which was also established in 1913. Both the 16th and 17th Amendment, they kind of go hand in hand, and they were both established in 1913. The 17th Amendment, as I mentioned a little while ago, that took the responsibility of the United States Senators to represent the states, and it put it into the same position as the U.S. House of Representatives, where it's supposed to represent the people, where they represent the people. The reason why that's not good is because you have to have a balance. Your local U.S. House member represents you. We have every area in the United States has its own House of Representatives. Mine is House Representative Joe Wilson. And so he represents the area that I live in, and he is supposed to represent the interest of the people within the bounds of the Constitution. And if the people need anything in their area, maybe they need a post office, that would be constitutional. Maybe we need something to do with the highways and roads, that would be constitutional. Then the people go to their representative, and the representative takes it to Congress, and he tries to get what we need. The senators were supposed to be the same way with the states, only they represented the states' interest. If the states thought that the money was not being spent wisely or inappropriately, then the U.S. senators had a voice on that in making sure that the money was spent the way it's supposed to be spent. It was a balance. Once we lost that balance, then the relationship between the state and the federal government flip-flopped. Prior to 1913, the federal government was dependent upon the states. If the federal government wanted to spend money on a certain area, they wanted to do something that the majority of the individual states did not agree with, the individual states could stop it. They could hold back the funds. Today it's reversed. Today we have states that actually owe the federal government money. And now we have the federal government in certain situations where they hold the states hostage. You know, we've all heard the cases where they'll say, hey, if you don't change the speed limits on the interstate going through your state, then we're going to withhold road funding. That's an example. That would have never happened prior to 1913. Prior to 1913, the federal government did not have that kind of power. We would not have had to go to the federal government for the money. We would have dealt with it ourselves. But now it's a different ball game. And if we really want to get the United States back to where it is supposed to be, back to where our founders intended it to be, then the two things that we have to do, we have to eliminate the federal income tax, because it's not paying for any projects anyway, and all it's doing is just putting people in direct conflict with the federal government. And we need to go back to allowing state legislators to appoint U.S. senators and not allow them to be voted on them, on the popular vote. I know it's kind of hard to understand, but if you want to have a check and balance, which is very important, you have to have representation for the people, and you have to have representation for the individual states. Otherwise, the people will wind up getting shafted, the states wind up getting shafted, and the federal government always makes off like a bandit, which is basically what it is. So those two amendments, the 16th Amendment and the 17th Amendment, needs to be reversed if we really are serious. Now, you won't hear your representatives talking about this because it's not in their interest, their personal, private interest to do so. But it's in the people's interest that we have a functional government with equal representation for both the state and the people, and we minimize any type of federal government overreach. And this is how our founders set our Constitution up to eliminate that.